you'll realize that these slides that I'm showing are not showing my, or they're not portraying my current employment affiliation, because I am going to speak in my own capacity. I'm not going to speak in the capacity of my employer or the project that I lead at my employer. My employer is United States Pharmacopoeia, as you heard, and I lead a USAID funded program under United States Pharmacopoeia called Promoting the Quality of Medicines Plus program. So I'll use my general knowledge. Some of it I might have gathered from my current work experience, some from my previous work experience, and also information from public domain and other sources to share with us what I'm sharing. So I would like to emphasize that whatever that I'll be remarking should be taken as my own remarks and not representative of the remarks of USP or USAID for the project that I lead, which is USAID funded. So there's a little bit of background, and thanks to Dr. Toroitich. He's given us a very nice background that I'll build on. I also want to say that I'm not speaking about any NRA here. This is a generic slide that will be talking about regulatory system strengthening on a generic basis. We might cite a few examples here and there, because as students of regulatory system strengthening, you never know where you'll work. You might be working in various jurisdictions, so it's important to have what we call the first principles, or the basics first. Then you can always contextualize them in whatever context that you find yourself in. So therefore, on the next slide, I provide just a brief overview about the GBT. And while I was preparing these slides, I wasn't too sure whether Dr. Toroitich might present or PPB. As you've heard, he is representing PPB. So I didn't also want to have a repetitious kind of series of slides. So I've cherry-picked what is there, just assuming that it has been mentioned before, so as to provide maybe emphasis and to create a subway into what we shall be discussing. So the World Health Organization has the global benchmarking tool that you've had, and it is a tool to enable the objective evaluation or assessment of the strength of a regulatory system, and by doing so, rate or gauge the maturity level. Grade the strength of a regulatory system by layers of maturity. More or less in the common world, for the sake of our learned friend here, you go to hotels and you find there's a hotel that is maybe 1 star and there's a hotel that is 5 star. What this GBT business is about is helping to have a kind of grading system or rating system that has a bearing or a say into the level of maturity and complexity of the regulatory system. As you may know, using the analogy that I'm mentioning, there are differences in terms of services that you will get if you go to a 5 star. And there are differences in the level of services if you go to a 1 star hotel. So, by implication also, when we are talking about the maturity of a regulatory system, you would expect also differences according to how mature the regulatory system is. So it helps to to identify, strengths, areas for improvement. As you heard from Dr. Toretich, we call those ones, they are gaps, but they are reflected into institutional development plans as plans for you to improve on. It facilitates the formulation of, the institutional development plans, as I've said, and the prioritization of interventions to where they are needed most, and also as a way of monitoring progress and achievements of the regulatory authorities' mandate and functions. There are several categories in the GBT tool, and again here I'm abbreviating a lot. If we this is a session that we take sometimes even days to go deep into. So here I'm just giving an overview and some highlights. So when you look at the GBT, which is the global benchmarking tool, there are about 9 or so thematic components that will be addressed, looking at the legislative environment, the regulation, SOPs, the guidelines, then the organization and governance of the regulatory system, which includes aspects of leadership, strategy planning, and aspects of governance like accountability, transparency, and looking at specific services. I need to put on my specs now. So quality and risk management and regulatory processes, we'll see a little bit what we mean by some of these things. Under regulatory processes, there's also, maybe I'll mention here the 9 regulatory components or functions that also Dr. Toretich mentioned. So this should not be confused. Is it on? This should not be confused. These 9 should not be confused with the 9 regulatory functions. They are different things. These are under every, let me say in a different way. Under each function, you expect to find these 9 things. Is it clear? There are functions like systems of the body. You have the cardiovascular system, you have the digestive system, you have maybe the renal or whatever system. So those are the 9 areas, the 9 regulatory functions. But within those 9 regulatory functions, you need to find these 9 elements. I hope that is clear. Yeah? Okay. Then the resources and the monitoring of progress and assessment of impact. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned, and I'll not belabor. I'm trying to simplify rather than going through, everything. Just also in the interest of time. Just like we saw for hotels, you have a 5-star kind of or a 7-star rating system. So for regulatory authorities, Dr. Toretich also has mentioned the original thinking of WHO were 6 levels, and then after piloting they were reduced to 5, and then there are those 5. The 5th one is deemed separate. So therefore, there are 4 that are left upon which every regulatory authority is assessed and graded. So these are the 4. The first one being very rudimentary, and the 4th one being very complex and very, very strong. And from the 4th one, when you add on, you couple with something, then you can become a world listed authority, WLA. Okay, so we can advance. There are some processes that WHO utilizes to in helping to assess the capacity, and also to develop or to strengthen the capacity of the regulatory authority or the national regulatory system. On the extreme left, we see that WHO began the process of developing the GBT, which you had PPB participated even in piloting. And then it used that to benchmark regulatory authorities. That benchmarking has been happening on the continent. We have a number of regulatory authorities, and there are different levels, but we know of the notable, maybe those that have attained variance or some form of maturity level 3. So which ones are those? Which ones do you know that have attained maturity level 3? Yeah, TMDA for Tanzania, yes. Ghana FDA, yes. Zimbabwe, yes. Another one? Egypt, yes. Let's look in West Africa. NAFDAC, yes. NAFDAC is for which country? Okay, and then lastly? Then there is Ghana. There's Ghana, and then on the southern part of Africa we have South Africa. Example that was mentioned that we help PPB on the human resources is just one of the areas. We are just one of the many partners that are working with PPB to address some of the pending IDPs that have been identified. And it is a continuous process. You check, you find you have deficiencies, you have a plan to close those deficiencies, and it continues like that until you close all of them. They are about 260 something, 63 sub-indicators that drive the IDPs, and you have to close all of them for you to be to advance to the next level. So then also the GBT can be used to assess and monitor progress of the regulatory authority in terms of the impact, the efficiency of the services, and so forth. So the partners or underlying all these processes, WHO recommends the establishment of a coalition of interested parties. These are basically partners that come together to work with the regulatory authority to help the regulatory authority to address those IDPs. If we take the example of PPB, PPB has a number of partners. Bill and Melinda Gates, there's USP, there is MSH, there's PATH, there's AMREF, and many other partners, yeah, that come together and support. If we take the example of the Rwanda FDA, also you find many partners there, European Union, the Germans, the Americans, and so forth. So you find every institution has its friends that work with to support them. Mention was made about different types of the maturity level, if it's ML3, for example, whether it is for vaccine manufacturing, whether it's for small molecules, and even for vaccine manufacturing, whether it is for domestic use or for exportation. And then the WHO listed authorities, WLA. Typically, that is what happens in the benchmarking process. What the slide is showing. This is illustrative of, for example, what PPB is going through. And PPB is one of those regulatory authorities that have been assessed for many years, as you had from 2009 during the piloting and the subsequently. So with the tool, you, as a regulatory authority, you can use it to self-assess. That is called self-benchmarking. But you see, when you self-assess, you can be blind to some things, yeah? So that goes through some verification, so that at least there is a little bit of objectivities, and those blind spots, they are removed. And then because you're doing it to improve your systems, when you feel that your systems are that mature enough, then you can invite WHO to come and do a formal assessment, and WHO will do the formal assessment, and they'll give you a formal report of the findings. Then you have to act on that, and when you have acted on those and you feel that you have closed those gaps, then you can call in WHO again to come and check and verify that you have closed those gaps. If you have closed all the requirements, the sub-indicators, indicators, and the sub-indicators for maturity level 3, then WHO will formally recognize you and announce that you have attained maturity level 3. So it's an iterative process, and that's basically, in summary, what happens. So yes, we can go to the next slide. This is a slide that combines some elements. Remember the 9 things that I was talking about, and I've just shown here a few, and also a few of the functions, the regulatory functions. Remember, there was 9 components across 9 regulatory functions. So some of them is like quality control, inspections, vigilance, market control, surveillance, and even clinical trials, for example. Dr. Toritich mentioned about patchwork in our legal framework. That's what we are doing, and we've been forging on. And we talked about pharmacovigilance being included in around 2019. But right now, I think one of the proposed amendments that are still being considered is inclusion of lot release. Lot release, which is a function pertaining to vaccines. So we can continue. Remember, we wanted to appreciate an overview, just an overview. As I said, this is a topic that we can delve in for a long time, but we are not going to go in that long. It's just to give us an appetizer, and then I was to highlight a few opportunities, then challenges, and then we close. So what opportunities exist for us in terms of use of the GBT assessments? One, as we saw, is a very systematic approach. So it builds in a systematic way of assessing, an objective way of assessing regulatory system strengthening. I am a pharmaceutical system strengthening expert. Regulatory system is just a component of it, and we see this logic in other components of pharmaceutical systems. You need to have a systematic, objective way of assessing the strength of the system so that you can make a proclamation about how robust that system is. So the GBT is one way. It also helps us as a tool for advocacy with policy and decision makers for more resources. You've heard that the example that Dr. Toritich said, nowadays even you go to the parliament, you say it's a requirement of GBT, you'll get it. Rwanda has been doing it very effectively for the last few, maybe less than 5 years. We already have even an authority. I worked in Rwanda, left Rwanda 2007. When I was in Rwanda, they were not they were not even registered. They were only listing, not even listing, just writing down. There's a difference regulatory-wise in terms of just writing down products that were being imported into the country. Yeah. So and because I was leading one hospital as a chief pharmacist, and I was importing in products, and I used to have challenges getting those import permits. So and it was one of the recommendations that we made at the hospital, that we need to have a regulatory system, because I cannot assure patients that the quality of this product that I'm importing, the responsibility now becomes mine as the chief pharmacist. If a patient dies out of a product that I imported, I'm culpable, and that was not a very comfortable situation to be in. So they have used this process effectively as a tool for advocacy. We are using it, and also many countries, they are using it. It can also help us in terms of, as a regulatory authority, to really streamline our functions and processes so that the delivery of regulatory services is enhanced. And it facilitates, because it's a common approach, harmonization. We are talking about regional harmonization and regulatory convergence, concepts of reliance. Those of you who have been going through the course may have touched on those. And then one thing that I've added here, and I said, that's why I was really emphatic that some of these are my own observation. I'm sharing with you things just from my experience and observations here. So like this last bullet is something that I'm saying actually there's a possibility of tailoring the GBT tool to specific country context, and I see this really relevant for small countries. Some of the countries that I work with, they are small island countries, or even if not that island countries, they're just small population-wise, landlocked. So would you expect a country like that one to have a fully fledged FDA? That's a question, and I'm going to come to this. And that's why I really wanted this session to be interactive, because there are some things that I wanted also to bounce off you and find out your thoughts about it. I didn't want to be pontificating here as if I'm on a pulpit. Yeah, I wanted us to really to have an interactive session. So next slide. In the context of what we are discussing this evening, I've highlighted 3 areas of benefit. Should we have, when you apply, we are saying the GBT is helping us to systematically strengthen our regulatory system. But so what? And we've just had one neighbor, their regulatory system is deemed stringent, but is it having an effect in terms of, the population health and, the patients? So we can look at this at 3 levels. At the patient level, a stronger regulatory regime enables timely access to safe, effective quality medical products. I've told you the example, like when I was a hospital pharmacist in Rwanda, you are having nightmares. You don't even know whether that product that you have brought in is good, it is substandard, it is adulterated, it's falsified. You don't know. So you bear that weight. But if you have a strong regulatory system, then you may have a certain level of reassurance that the products that are being utilized in that environment are good. Then how about for the regulatory authority themselves? We have already seen it is a tool to help you enhance your systems, to strengthen your system, and to improve the quality of the regulatory services that you provide. And for the manufacturers, because we've been discussing manufacturers this evening, is also to enable them to have really streamlined, to support their compliance they strengthen also their processes and also to help them to be better in terms of complying to regulatory requirements. And there are many other benefits. I was just highlighting a few. So we can go to, I mentioned about regulatory reliance. Tap again, just once. Thank you. So regulatory reliance means when you are a community of regulators. Now we are not talking about PPB alone. You are talking about PPB, you are talking about, I think I had about NDA or Uganda, the Uganda regulatory authority, there is TMDA, and many others. So how do we also collaborate as a community of regulators? So that aspect of working together collaboratively and relying on each other, because some of these processes are expensive. So there's no point of you repeating some of these, processes when you are maybe in the same environment or region. So there are thoughts and ways in which such can be enhanced. And this slide here is speaking about various layers of reliance, from standardizing processes to work sharing, and then really reliance, and ultimately to recognition. When you sit there, you say, we as Kenya, we recognize whatever Uganda is doing. If there is a product that Uganda says is not good, we don't have to question. We just recognize what they have said. That is the highest level of regulatory reliance. In the next slide, I think we start going to challenges. Again here, I've picked just a few. I wanted us to discuss some of them, but I'll highlight those that I want your input in. So the first point here, I see some countries struggle with the basics of the national regulatory system. One slide that I'm realizing I could have included is the slide that shows those 9 components of a functional regulatory system. Like the way we look at the human body, we say a human body should have the digestive system, it should have the musculoskeletal system, and like that. If you don't have that, then you will not be a human body. Maybe you'll be what? A jellyfish or something like that, yeah? So also regulatory system, national regulatory authorities, they need to have some basic systems for you to be called a national regulatory authority. One of them being the national regulatory system that encompasses aspects like legal provisions. Let's take the example of Kenya, the CAP 244 that was being talked about. It has been a patchwork, which is the truth. It has been a patchwork. And some countries don't even have the required legislative framework to underpin the regulatory function. And we are having here Wakili, and he'll say, if you are not basing your existence on a law, then whatever else that you're doing, you will be challenged, because you are just doing it out of your own wishes. So it has to be really underpinned by a strong legal legislative framework, and also there needs to be clarity. I've seen this in some countries where you have a number of regulatory bodies. There is kind of overlap of mandate, and sometimes there is also competition. So if we take, for example, like here in Kenya, I'm trying to look at maybe a diagnostic kit. At some point, the laboratories board, was saying we have, regulatory mandate over it. Pharmacy board will also say that. So just an example. Or if you look, this I've seen in other countries, but maybe even in Kenya, some product which the Bureau of Standards say we are the ones who have the mandate to regulate this product. Yeah? Maybe I'm just imagining if it's pharmaceutical sugar. Yeah, So pharmacy board can say, we have the mandate to regulate pharmaceutical sugar. But the Bureau of Standards might say, no, this is sugar, because they just see sugar and say this is sugar, and it is within our mandate to regulate. So those kind of things can come in the way of implementing the GBT. Independence, autonomy and independence, I'll talk about them. We are talking about an institution that is autonomous, able to function on its own. You can put it on autopilot and it will serve its role. Not someone pulling some strings. If someone is pulling some strings somewhere, then if it means that really you are a puppet. If something is in the market that should be pulled out, you don't have the power. You might have the will, but you don't have the power or the capability of doing that, because there are people pulling strings. The financial part is very important. If the regulatory authority does not have a means of getting financial resources dedicated to running regulatory functions, then I tell you it is gonna be very difficult for that regulatory authority to execute its roles, and that is one area that the GBT will really penalize you, because without that, then you'll not be able to carry out your regulatory roles. Then human resources, we've had the stories, so I'll not emphasize that, both in numbers, in skills. Digital platform to enhance service delivery, to enhance transparency. Remember earlier, the 9 things I was listing, there was provisions for transparency and efficiency and accountability, so digital platforms and digital processes, technological solutions might be useful in achieving those. But you find that many regulatory authorities, they struggle to have in place those. Fragmentation of regulatory functions, and I've just used here an example. It so happens that example is also relevant to Kenya, where like the National Quality Control Laboratory is it's a different institution with its own kind of framework. So sometimes in some countries you find that the coordination is not very smooth, because it should be part and parcel of the regulatory system, but they are under different institutions. Then aspects of harmonization, because even within the GBT you want to show that you are working together within other peer regulatory authorities. You can't do everything alone. You can't. You have to work with your peers. So that's where we have harmonization, convergence, and these are some of the challenges that may come in the face of convergence. For example, different versions of products being marketed in different markets or regions. If, for example, maybe this is just imaginary, if Kenya wanted to collaborate maybe with maybe Egypt, maybe you find even the packaging of the products, maybe it's in Arabic, or maybe if you wanted to collaborate maybe with Senegal or Burkina Faso, maybe it is in French and things like that. So and different kind of circumstances surrounding the product. And then sometimes in terms of review of dossiers, sometimes you find the dossiers are overly redacted, they don't have enough information. Hesitancy to use some of the pathways you find because of sovereign considerations, or a sovereign state says we want to do it this way. The Kenyans are doing it that way, but us, we want to do it this way. So when you have those considerations, then it comes into the way of harmonizing. And then which is also related to the national requirements. Now, this last question is something that I've mentioned. let's continue reflecting on it, whether really all GBT elements are necessary for small states or countries. We don't know, but in the next slide, I think I'll show you something. The next slide. So the Pan-American Health Organization has attempted to answer this question. So they have been doing some work, because in mostly the Southern American, states, in the Caribbeans, you find so many islands there. Some are very small. So that's why they had to do some work, and they have published some guidance, which for them, they have found to be working. So to summarize, these are the various regulatory, the 9. Remember, I was saying I missed a slide of the 9 regulatory function components. Actually, these are the ones. Are they 9 if I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then lot release. Yeah, lot release, the 9th one. So this one is non-negotiable. So whether you are small, whether you are big, this is non-negotiable. Registration, you have to know. You have to authorize products in your systems. Market licensing of a service, those products operate within premises. Yeah? So you need to ensure that those premises, whether they are retail, wholesale, manufacturing, you need to license those establishments. So it's necessary. Whether you are small, whether you are big. Market surveillance and control, you have to survey your market. It doesn't matter whether you are a country of 200,000 people or you are a country of 200 million people. You have to survey the products in the market, and therefore also you also have to conduct vigilance, which is really following up on how patients are interacting with their products, if they are having adverse, harmful effects. And then also regulatory inspection, because coupled with the establishment, you need to inspect those premises, whether they are for manufacturing, whether they are for distribution. You have to inspect as part of good distribution, manufacturing and good distribution practices. Now, this is a little bit controversial. Again, we don't have time to debate. So then they say, clinical trials, a country of 200,000 people, why do you need to do it? Maybe you can rely on the bigger neighbor. Yeah, if your demographics are similar, why should I invest in that? So that one can pass. You can rely. Remember the thing of reliance. I know I've passed through it, but it's very important for some of these countries, yeah, and some context. Then another controversy is lab testing. Why should you have because lab is very expensive to set up and operate. So if you're a country of 200,000 people, why do you need to have a lab that is big with high-tech equipment, expensive? Can't you rely on your neighbor? You just outsource. So these are some of the debates that someone like me I face. Because when I'm invited sometimes to advise a country on how to establish or to strengthen the regulatory system, so these are some of these things we discuss, and sometimes they can be very emotive because everybody wants to do it. But do you have the means? That's the question. Do you have the means? You have the desire. But do you have the means to do it? I'm going to one country, you pray for me. I'm going to one country in 2 weeks, and this is one of the things I'm going to face. The minister and the parliamentarians. We have to argue. I come in as a technical person. I give you advice, and it's up to you to take it or leave it here. But people have to be realistic also. I'm talking here as an academic I'm free to talk this, but the language that we use when we are talking to somebody, we don't use this language. You have to have politically savvy language to convey the same message that I'm conveying. So let's continue, and I'm about to come to an end. So the way forward, I think this should be my last slide. This my thoughts. We can always discuss. I think it is important to continue capacity building of NRAs and also even people outside of the NRA like yourselves, so that we have a pool of skilled people that can render services to the regulatory authority. Dr. Toritich said during our time, we just put there and you learn on the job, you go. But you have a little bit of an advantage. You are getting some snippets of this way beforehand, by the time at least you go into a regulatory environment opportunity, you are familiar. It's important to continue regulatory reforms. We've talked about the legislative frameworks. We've talked, for example, about CAP 244. So what does it mean for Kenya, for example? We see Kenya is in the process of setting up food and drug, what is it called, the FDA? KDA. KDA, yes. So there's a legislative framework that will support that. Continue technical assistance to the NRAs to address the IDPs. As you remember, the coalition of partners, they need support. Typically, you find that even in advanced economies, there's value in really working together collectively to address those gaps and strengthening the regulatory system. Leveraging regional harmonization initiatives, and as well as the African Medicine Agency that was mentioned. You had it, I think Dr. Vimal Patel, he may have mentioned, Dr. Toritich also mentioned. It is being housed in Rwanda, so that is good. It's in the region, East African region. It's also important to consider expanding the GBT to other medical products. We have people here who are working in medical devices, people here who are working in blood-related products, and other. We had maybe cosmetics and things like that. So perhaps it's also an opportunity to expand the GBT as a tool to cover these other products, and also to customize. We need to continue to customize our regulatory system strengthening approach to country contexts, like the case that I'm talking about, small countries. Another example that I see which is of relevance is thought need to be given on whether you want to combine product regulation and practice regulation in one institution. The example of Kenya Pharmacy and Poisons Board, is there. Vis-a-vis separating into product regulation, a different institution regulating products, and a different institution regulating practice. That is a very careful. That is something that needs to be very carefully thought about, because there are countries which maybe even population dynamics come in because they are smaller. So when you separate, you may not be able to have revenues to run the organization. Remember, we saw finances, yeah? And the smaller countries, they always are caught in a cycle where if you depend on the exchequer, the exchequer will tell you we don't have enough money. So we can only give you wanted $100, we'll give you only $1 because of the situation in Nigeria. So sometimes other countries I've seen, they combine so that the revenues that they get from product regulation and from regulation of the professionals, when you combine them, they reach a critical mass to run the regulatory institution. So sometimes, again, in my experience, when I go to some of those countries, those are things that we look at very carefully, so that we advise the country appropriately. Otherwise, you can advise the country and you have two institutions that cannot sustain themselves. So you're not even helping the country. Then use of, more use of technological solutions in regulatory processes to achieve those ideals that we mentioned, for example, more transparency, efficiency, and accountability. So I'll stop there. I know it is late. I'm sorry to have taken long, but this is the beginning, I think, of our interaction. And if we have more opportunities another time, maybe we can delve into some of these things into detail. So let me stop there.